Hi, everyone. I am David Lipton, creator of the podcast series The Reckoning, July 4th, 2030. I am introducing an experimental series of AI generated conversations, complements of Notebook LM. These conversations are based entirely on my podcasts. They are called the Deep Dive series. Just imagine two of your friends discussing my podcasts and enjoy the conversations.
Welcome to the deep dive. Today we're kind of tackling a big one, how we know anything at all. Our listener wrote in with some really interesting questions about knowledge, belief, and how those things play out in the world, especially when it comes to politics. So we're going to dive into all that today.
Yeah, should be interesting.
You shared this clip from the podcast, The Reckoning, July 2030. And in it, the host, what was his name again? David Lipton. He starts off with this question.
Well, Lipton.
Okay. Lipton, right. He just asks, does the Earth revolve around the sun? And it's like, okay, duh, obviously, but it gets you thinking.
It seems so simple.
Yeah. Like, how many things do we just accept as facts because, well, that's what we were told?
It's really interesting he uses that example. Because what Lipton's doing is he's using it to introduce this idea of the platforms we all stand on.
Platforms.
Yeah, and he's not just talking about, like, physical ground.
Yeah.
He means the foundation of our beliefs, all the stuff that makes up how we see the world.
So it's like, we're not just standing on solid ground, we're standing on our own little island of truth.
Exactly.
And that island's made up of a mixture of what we believe are facts and how we connect those facts to, everything else.
Exactly. And that's where things get even more interesting, because Lipton takes this idea of platforms and he uses it to talk about politics.
Okay, now hold on. My brain's trying to picture politicians like floating on platforms in space. But seriously, how do you go from like the Earth going around the sun to something as messy as politics?
Well, he's saying that just like each person has their own, platform of understanding, so do entire political parties. And he uses the Democrats and Republicans as a really good example.
Makes sense.
And to get this point across even better, he even brings up Thomas Sowell's book, A Conflict of Visions, which,
Oh, yeah, I've heard of that. Isn't it about how, like, at the most basic level, the two parties just see the role of government totally differently? To be honest, I haven't actually read it myself, though.
basically, yeah.
Yeah.
So it says these different viewpoints, they actually come from different assumptions about, well, human nature. Like, is humanity inherently flawed? Do we need a lot of rules and a limited government? Or are we capable of reason and cooperation, so we need a more active government? That kind of thing.
So it's not even just about disagreeing on specific policies. It's about seeing the world, like the whole world, even human nature, in completely different ways. Man, no wonder it's so hard to find common ground these days.
Right. And to make it all even trickier, Lipton says there's another thing that shapes how we see things. Hollywood.
Wait, Hollywood? Like the movies? What does that have to do with politics?
Well, he's saying that we're just so bombarded with media all the time that we end up being way more focused on the personalities of politicians than what they actually, stand for. He calls it the Hollywoodization of politics, which I think is a pretty apt description, wouldn't you say?
So instead of looking at their policies, their platforms, we're basically just voting for like who we'd rather hang out with.
Yeah. Or who gives the better speech. Like, we're choosing the lead in some political drama.
Yikes.
And that can really mess with how we see things. It's like we've swapped out all those, actual policy platforms for something way more glamorous, like a political red carpet. And most exciting figures going to get the most attention, even if their ideas aren't, all that great.
Man, that's kind of scary how true that feels. Because it is exciting. It's hard not to get swept up in the drama of it all, especially with social media. Like, it's constant, We're always seeing these huge political personalities.
Oh, absolutely. And I don't think Lipton's trying to make us feel bad about it, really. It's more like he wants us to just be aware of it. Because it does affect things, this Hollywoodization. Like, it changes how we vote, even how we think about things in the first place.
It's like we're watching a movie trailer and thinking we know what the whole movie's about without even seeing it.
Exactly. We're just reacting to whatever, sounds good or looks impressive. We don't see the behind the scenes, the stagecraft of it all. But then, and this is really interesting, Lipton goes back to that original question, the sun and the earth one.
Okay.
Because he wants to use that to talk about, like, how do we know anything at all? Especially in something as, let's face it, complicated as politics.
Okay, I gotta admit, I'm a little lost. How do we go from Hollywood back to the Earth and Sun?
Just hang with me here. Because what Lipton's getting at is this. We really only know something when, like, we've decided it's true for ourselves. Like, we go and find information, whether it's news, experts, whatever. But we tend to look for stuff that already matches what we already believe.
Oh, yeah, confirmation bias. I've totally done that.
We all have. It's human nature. But it goes deeper than that even. Because Lipton says we're not just looking for our own confirmation. We also kind of need other people to validate what we think.
So it's not enough to just think it myself. Other people need to agree with me.
Yeah. It's like we're more likely to question ourselves if we think everyone else disagrees,
Yeah.
even if we have our own doubts deep down. And then the opposite happens too, right? Like when people agree with us, we feel even stronger about it,
Right.
even if maybe it's not totally right or the whole picture.
Yeah, it's like we all want to feel like we're part of a group, you know?
Right.
Like nobody wants to be the one person who thinks differently.
Totally. But the thing is, like Lipton says, that need to fit in, it can also make us less likely to, I don't know, to really question things, especially with something like politics where everybody's got such strong opinions.
It makes me think about those times when, like, I've totally kept my mouth shut, even though I had a different take on something. It's weird how strong that feeling can be, you know? Like, you don't want to rock the boat.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
It's way easier to just go along with what everyone else is saying. But that's when we can kind of get stuck in those, like, those little bubbles of belief, even if they're not totally right.
So then how do we get out of that cycle? Like, how do we stop just agreeing with everybody else all the time?
Well, I don't think Lipton's saying we need to, like, completely give up on knowing anything, right? It's more about realizing that what we believe, it's not always, like, the full picture.
So it's like we have to be more aware of how we're thinking, not just what we're thinking.
Yeah, like, even our most basic beliefs, we got to ask ourselves, okay, why do I think this is true?
Mm.
You know, where did I get that idea in the first place?
It's almost like we have to be, I don't know, a little skeptical of everything, even or maybe especially the things we're sure about.
Yeah, exactly. And the coolest thing is when we're able to question stuff, even the stuff that makes us uncomfortable, it actually helps us learn and understand things better.
So it's like we're building bridges between all those little islands of truth.
I like that.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that process of like connecting and asking questions, it's a lifelong thing, you know.
Right.
It can be hard, but it's so worth it.
This has been a wild ride. I feel like we've covered so much ground today.
Definitely. And it all started with a simple question.
Exactly. And to our listener who wrote in, we hope this has given you and everyone listening a lot to think about. What if those things you're most sure about, those platforms you stand on, what if they're not as solid as you thought? How would that change how you see things, how you connect with people, even just like how you see yourself? It's a big question. But hopefully we've given you some good tools to start exploring it.